Hey everybody, I'm excited to be here at SailsConf. Want to give a shout out to Kelvin for putting together the conference. Thank you for having me. Also, big shout out to Mike and the entire sales team for making such a great framework to start with and keeping it active and maintained over the years. Super excited to be here with you today and share my passion for sales and some tricks and tips that I've picked up along the way. So today I'm going to be talking to you about building an MVP with sales, and that's a minimum viable product. So that's typically the very first thing that you launch. You want to get it out quickly. It's not beta, so that's a common kind of confusion is it's not a full beta release where you have a full feature set and some iteration and time to build on it. An MVP is really the minimum viable product that you can build that provides value to anybody so that you can get to the market quickly. And really the goal of an MVP is to test your assumptions and try to find some product market fit and make sure that people actually want the solution that you're building in the problem space that you've identified. So a little bit about me. My name is Luke Heath. I'm a partner at Heath Software, also a big sales aficionado. I'm a designer, I'm a developer, I'm a product manager, but really I just love building new products and bringing new products to market that solve business problems. I love sales, I love using sales to build new products, and just love building new products in general for all kinds of things. I think technology and software is really magical, and when you can just identify a problem and think up a solution and create something new and introduce it to the world, that feels like magic to me. It feels like I'm living in Harry Potter almost. You know, we don't have magic wands, but we have some magic frameworks like sales that we can use to accomplish some pretty magical things really at the end of the day. So that's why I love building products, and I'm excited to share my enthusiasm with you. If you want to keep in touch or follow along with me, you can go to github.com/LukeHeath. I have some repos there. You can follow me. Also publish this presentation there if you want to have it for reference. So moving on, the talk is MVP ASAP. And of course that stands for minimum viable product as soon as possible. So let's just break that down really one letter at a time. So the M, minimum, that is probably the single biggest issue that folks run into when they're building an MVP, is they just set the bar way too high and they try to accomplish too much with the first iteration. So what you really want to think about is what provides the minimum value to absolutely anybody. So it doesn't have to address a large market segment. It doesn't have to change the world. It just has to solve any problem for anybody. So that's a good kind of mindset to have when you're building an MVP, to keep yourself in check and stop yourself from just spending too much time on that first iteration. So the minimum viable product, what's going to help anybody solve the problem that I've identified. And then the second part is ASAP, as soon as possible. And this is kind of the second stumbling block that people run into, which is just simply taking too long to build out your initial MVP. There's a saying, if your MVP doesn't embarrass you, you waited too long to release it. And I'm a believer in that saying. You should feel, at least at some level, a little bit of embarrassment with what the MVP is. And that's just because it's not supposed to represent your best work. It's not supposed to be a shining example of your software architecture skills or your design skills. Really what you're trying to do is just validate the solution that you've developed for the problem in the market that you've identified. And you want to do that as soon as possible so that if you're off and if the solution that you're developing does not address the problem you've identified, you want to know that as soon as possible so that you can start actually addressing the problem in the right way. And you can't really do that until you have something out in front of users that they can use and start giving you some feedback. Nothing is more valuable in early product development, and really product development forever than actual user feedback. Because otherwise, you're just building features that you think the market wants. But if you put out an MVP, get some early test users and get feedback, you're going to be developing features that you know the market wants because it's actually telling you. So those are some key concepts to keep in mind when building an MVP. So the process that I use when building out an MVP in a software product in general is what I call the 4 Ds. And that's discover, define, develop, and deploy. And then once you deploy, you really just go back to discover and go through the process again and iterate as you continue to learn more about the problem space, get feedback, and develop new solutions. So let's start with the first step, discover a problem. So I've underlined problem because that's really where you want to start. You want to find problems first before you think of a solution. So sometimes what folks will do is they'll come up with a feature or a cool idea or some kind of concept for a solution before they've really identified what the problem space is that they're solving. And the issue with that is you're leading feature first without necessarily identifying a problem, is that you may be solving a problem that doesn't actually exist or that nobody really has. So the first thing that you want to make sure you have clarity on is what's the problem that I'm solving with this software? And specifically, you want to find a problem, ideally, that's a problem that you have, because you're going to know the problem space a lot better if it's a problem that you've run into. And if it's a problem that you're running into, you can bet that it's a problem other people are running into. So I always think that's the best place to start, is just look for problems that you're running into in your life, in your workflow, whatever the space is that you want to work in. So once you discover that problem, you want to define a minimum viable product that would address the problem. So again, we're getting back to the concept of a minimum viable product. What is the absolute baseline that would do anything to address this problem? Start there and actually release that. Don't just build that first and then layer on more and more features. Because what can end up happening is there's just always, well, I just want to add this next feature, just want to add one more thing, and before you know it, 6-12 months have passed and you still haven't released anything. And now you're just in this echo chamber of making features and solutions that you think people want without actually knowing if people want it and without actually validating if it's solving the problem that you've identified. So once you define what that minimum viable product is, that's when you move into develop. And here I've underlined rapid, develop a rapid solution. And again, this is just driving home that you want to move quickly through the development process. You're not trying to architect the perfect piece of software that's going to scale to millions of users. That's not the problem that we're trying to solve. The problem you're trying to solve is just, is my solution addressing the problem in the market? And are users going to think that? So really, as soon as you can get something launched, the better. And that's where I love Sails. Sails is just great at building software quickly and getting something up and off the ground because of all of the great features and starting points that the Sails team built. So I really love using Sails for building out MVPs and just software in general, but especially if you want to move quickly. So you really need to get your MVP out in the first month that you're building it. Month 1, you should have something launched. Week 1, even better. Day 1, that's awesome. If you can do it in a day, do it in a day, launch that, because that's just going to get you into a mindset of moving quickly and deploying frequently. And again, now we move into deploy, and gather feedback. So feedback underlined here is the key concept, because that's why we're deploying it. We're not deploying it so everyone can just tell us how amazing it is. We've already kind of outlined that you should feel a little bit embarrassed. So you're not just looking for praise and kudos and high fives on the thing that you launch. What you really want is constructive feedback from users so that you can continue to improve. So keep in mind, this isn't even beta. This is just an MVP, a very early example that you can use as a starting point for future iteration. So once you gather that feedback, now you're going to go back to discover and say, okay, are we addressing that problem? Maybe a new problem has come up that users are telling us about, and then you're going to move through the whole process again and deploy again. And if you can deploy once a month, that's great. Deploy once a week, that's even better, where you're just constantly pushing out new features and then gathering feedback based on what you've launched. So why Sails? Sails is a convention over configuration framework. And what that means is that it's pre-configured to a large degree, and the community has agreed on what those conventions should be. And what that means is that we don't have to start the project by building just tons and tons of configuration files because they're already in place. And as long as we can all agree on a convention, we can just skip all of that configuration work. Now, of course, with Sails, you can go in and change all of those configurations. It's very configurable, but you don't have to. If you just want to say, I'm going to roll with the out-of-the-box conventions from Sails, you can totally do that and just leapfrog over the entire configuration process. Number 2, blueprints, auto-generated REST APIs. So when you create a new model using blueprints, you can automatically have your CRUD routes created, your create, read, update, destroy routes that are really the bread and butter of an MVP, is what are your models, what are the associations, and then having API endpoints to manipulate those. And with Sails, you just have those immediately as soon as you create your models. And then lastly, what I love about Sails with MVP is the web app starter project. So when you create a new Sails project, you have the option of creating an empty Sails project with just the back end and a bare bones front end, or you can start it with a full web app that includes a lot of great features on both the back end and the front end. So those features include user authentication, sign up, login, forgot password, internal and transactional emails using SendGrid. So sign up with SendGrid, plug in your API token, and you just immediately have transactional emails, internal emails for contact forms, forgot password emails, password reset. That all just works out of the box. It also has payment support out of the box using Stripe. Just plug in a Stripe API. And then lastly, Parasails and Cloud Sdk. So Parasails is an minimal integration library between the Vue front end that Sails uses and the Sails backend. And then the Cloud Sdk wraps all of your REST endpoints in method calls. So now with Vue, I don't have to bring in the HTTP module and configure my own HTTP calls and handle the callbacks and all of that. Instead, I can just call cloud.whatever.create and have it handle all of that for me. So what I found is with this kind of starting point that Sails gives you, you really save just so much time in the project development. I'd say probably 2 weeks of development is included just out of the box with Sails. And the reason the Sails team created this is they just, from creating projects over and over again, found that they were really just creating the same features again and again for every project. And of course, we've all been there. We've created hundreds of sign-up forms and login forms just over and over again. It's tedious, it's not fun, but it's something that every app needs. So the great thing with this is out of the box, you have all of that scaffolding and early kind of repetitive work done, and you can just dive straight into the business logic of the app that you're building, which is the fun stuff that we all want to be putting our time towards anyway. So I love Sails' ability to do that and just to dive straight into the business logic. So what I'd like to do is talk about, kind of go through the process of building an MVP and what I think about and how do I approach it, and then I'll actually take a little bit of time to get into the code and spin up a new Sails project and start applying some of these changes and configuration and getting an initial MVP online. So to start with, I have a domain called danger.life. I just found it a few years ago. I'm kind of a domain collector, as many of us are probably, and I found danger.life a couple years ago. Thought it was a cool domain, went ahead and grabbed it, and I'd like to put something online and just to kind of start experimenting with the concept. So I started thinking, what's going to be a good product at a danger.life domain. So let's go into the discovery process. Danger.life to me thinks about, okay, a dangerous life, doing things that scare you, big goals in your life, maybe getting married, maybe going skydiving. That's kind of a dangerous thing. And so I had the idea of creating a goal tracking app for big, scary life goals. So that's what we're going to roll with for this MVP. So current goal tracking apps are focused on small, incremental changes in daily habits, but there's a lack of focus on long-term life goals. And feature bloat for many of those existing apps just makes them cumbersome to use. There's too much going on, and it's tracking, every little goal that you have, and what I want to focus on is the big life goals and things that really scare you. That was kind of the tagline that jumped out at me when I was thinking through this problem was, do things that scare you. What really kind of scares you, but you want to do it anyway. And that's the problem space that we want to focus on. So define, what would solve that? And I think it would be a web app that allows you to establish life goals, set a deadline, receive reminders, and share with friends. So that's a pretty minimum viable product. I can go create a goal, I can commit to a deadline, I can tell it that I want to receive reminders and what the frequency is, and then I can share it with friends so they can help keep me accountable and encourage me to get it done and help me celebrate when I do. So as part of the defining process, I just love whiteboarding. I love getting in front of a whiteboard, getting the entire team in front of the whiteboard, and just going fast and sloppy. So, you don't want to get hung up here on creating something nice, obviously, as you can see by my example here. You really just want speed and just kind of concepts. What's the rough layout going to look like? Here I've defined what the entity is going to be. So the primary entity that we're interested in is goal. Of course, we have a user, but that comes pre-built with, or kind of pre-configured with the Sales Starter app. So I'm focused on goal. It's going to have a name. It's going to have a deadline, which is probably optional. Reminders, who's it shared with, what are the comments, and description. Probably have a separate comment entity or model at some point, but early on, just to move quickly, those could really just be an array of strings that are included on the goal. So again, fast and sloppy. I just grab a magazine to have a nice rectangle. I outline that, and then I just go quickly to kind of outline rough flows. And really what you want to lock down is from the very home page, the first thing a user is going to see, all the way through to completing that problem space or solving that problem. So here we're looking at that's probably a 6-step process. You have step number 1, which is the home page. You have a sign up. You have goals and friends. You have a create goal, invite friends, and then you have your dashboard that kind of shows all of those. So fast and sloppy, keep it simple. You don't want to go overboard adding a bunch of features and a bunch of ideas. You want to define your models. You want to define the user flow. What's that user journey going to look like? And then lastly, you want to involve the entire team. So if you're working on a large team, get everybody in there that you can, not just necessarily people that are involved in product or design or engineering, because really anyone can bring insight or see things from a different perspective. So the more perspectives that you can have in the room, the stronger your MVP is going to be. So at this point, if you're working in more of a professional context, you may take the step of going to something like Balsamiq wireframes and actually building out interactive wireframes or InVision and doing them that way. But for what I'm doing, which is just me, just a passion project for fun, I'm actually going to skip that entire process, and I'm just going to develop around these wireframes that I've mapped out. And that's just going to, again, let me move quickly and not get hung up on details that may not be relevant right now. So simple branding. I just like to move quickly. It's easy to get hung up on branding and logos and taglines, but again, we don't even know if this is a concept that's going to resonate with anybody, so we don't want to get too hung up. So really, you just need a color palette, a logo, and a tagline. There's lots of resources that you can use to do that quickly. So for this one, first I started with a logo generator. One that I like is Luca.com, and that one had some decent ones, but I wasn't really feeling any of them, so I decided to actually go to nounproject.com and find an icon. I had in my mind kind of a lightning bolt. So just searched for a lightning bolt, found one that I liked, found a font that I liked, put them together, went to a color palette generator. I wanted something kind of bright and exciting, so I went with this kind of bright magenta, and then put the tagline, "Do what scares you" underneath it, and boom, 30 minutes, and we have enough branding to launch our MVP. All right, so now that we have that, we're actually ready to start building things out. So at this step is where you use the Sales web app generator to quickly validate assumptions and test the solution. So with the Sales web app generator, really you can build this out in, I'd say a week tops, because of so much of the pre-work that's done ahead of time. So as you build that out, last step is deploy. I like to use Heroku to host that for easy setup, and the existing sales deployment process is already tied into Heroku. So you can just run sales deploy and it'll build a package for you, push a deploy branch to your GitHub repo, and then you can just have Heroku listen to that branch and it'll pull in the fully built production ready sales app, and you're up and running. So that's a kind of my high level quick approach to building out an MVP and testing a solution. So let's talk more code. So I'm just going to check my time here. Okay, so going to move through this pretty quickly, so we won't have time to get into too many details, but I do want to show some of the code side of things. So I'm going to hop over to the code window. Let's blow this up a little bit. All right, so we're going to make our folder. We're going to say sales new, and then it's going to ask us if we want the web app or the empty. We're building out a rapid MVP, so I'm just going to go with web app, and now it's going to install dependencies. It's going to take a minute because it's actually running npm install and installing all of the node modules necessary for sales. So we'll just sit here and wait for the dependencies to finish up. There we go, and we're all set. So now I can actually just run sales lift, and I already have an app ready to go. So let's pull that up and see what it looks like. So this is the sales web app out of the gate, and believe it or not, it already has sign up. So I can already go here. Boom. Got that. I can update my email. I can do the forgot password once I hook up SendGrid, and that's just all working out of the gate. So it gives you a little bit of a kind of high level, what does this app do? How do I need to configure it? Most of the details are actually in the frequently asked questions. So you can just go here and it's going to take you step by step, basically everything that you need to do to customize the web app and get it up and running with payments and with emails. The first thing that you're going to want to, actually let me touch on this first. It comes with Bootstrap 4, so that's a HTML CSS framework that most people are familiar with, been around for a long time, developed by Twitter initially. You can go to getbootstrap.com and see all the components that are available that you can plug into the app. Font awesome for icons. It uses Vue as the front end framework. Parasails, so again, this is the kind of integration layer between the front end and the back end. Real lightweight library that the sales team built. And then we have SendGrid and Stripe. You just need to create accounts there, get an API key that you can plug into your config, and you'll be up and running there. Next, you've got some search and replace that you need to do. So anywhere that the app name is, the sales team has just listed this constant new app name. So you're just going to want to do a search and replace through all the files and replace new app name with your app, with your company name, and then here you've got some privacy policy last updated, terms of service last updated, and company about page, which would probably link to your marketing site, maybe Squarespace or something like that. Something worth pointing out is the terms of use and privacy policy, which are super helpful and included by the sales team. They needed to get something put together by an attorney for apps they were building, and they were generous enough to share that with the community. So this is real, professionally produced terms of service privacy policy. Obviously, once you're scaling the business up, you're going to want to retain your own attorney to review and modify this. But it's just really nice to have right out of the gate some of this boilerplate stuff that's just good for everybody to have. So this just kind of has like boilerplate high-level terms. So take a look at those, make sure you're familiar, and modify anything that you need to there. So after you've done the search and replace, it's going to walk you through how to use the Cloud SDK. So again, this is the library that allows you to make method calls instead of having to put together your own HTTP calls to interact with the API endpoints. So for example, cloud.doSomething.with, rather than having to wire up your own HTTP module. Walks you through generating pages with Parasails. So this is going to generate a server-side page as well as a corresponding front-end page with Vue. So what the web app uses, it does not use out of the box a single page application experience. Instead, it has several server-rendered pages that have their own lightweight Vue page within that. So you still get all the benefits of using Vue and just kind of data binding and helper functions. But without having to manage all of the data that comes with a large single page application where you're having to clear data from the previous view and load in new data. And what that does is it just makes it a lot cleaner and a lot easier to maintain over time, because Parasails is just pushing in the data that you need for that page, and it just makes it much simpler. Now, if you want a rich single page application experience, you could still build that on any of these pages, but out of the box, you're going to have multiple server rendered pages with multiple Vue page instances within that. Gives you some kind of information about updating styling and what's up with the inline styles, how to deploy to Heroku, which again is just sales run deploy, and that's going to package up a production build, put it in a deploy branch, and push that up to your GitHub instance. So at that point, all you have to do is tie Heroku, or have Heroku listen to your deploy branch, and it'll handle everything from there. And just gives you a little information about setting up SendGrid and setting up Stripe. Also some information, so you don't want to use Bootstrap or you want to use a different icon library, all of that's listed here. So super helpful, frequently asked questions. Don't forget to check that out. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do when you get in here is empty out this information. Of course, after you've read it and make sure you understand all of it, you can go in and delete that. So let's actually open up the code. So this is what a new Sales web app instance looks like. API, of course, that's going to be all the backend files, assets. This is going to be your front end. You have your dependencies, your JS, your styles, templates. These are going to be for your front end templates, or actually, yeah, I think front end templates. Config, these are all the configuration files when we were talking about convention over configuration. This is where it all is. If you want to change things, this is where you'll turn on blueprints. Node modules, scripts, so this just comes with the Rebuild Cloud SDK. So every time you're adding new endpoints that you want to interact with via the method calls of the Cloud SDK, you need to rerun the Rebuild Cloud SDK. That'll produce a new SDK file for you based on your routes definition file. And then you have your tasks. This is just your build, grunt tasks. And then view, these are your server rendered views. So for example, home page. And this is the home page that we're seeing. So what you'd want to do first is basically just empty all of this out except for the top level. Home page, vcloak. All right, now that's empty. Now I would grab my logo. So I've got my logos ready over here. All right, that looks good. Now I can just pop over here, Danger Life, assets, images, drop my logo here. And actually I'm going to want to relift sales so it copies over the new front end assets. And boom, got Danger Life there. Obviously we're going to want that a little bigger. So that's where we go into the layouts area. And layout is going to include the navigation. This is where you can change these pre-built navigation or pre-included navigation items. And it already has the checks here for, is the user logged in? If so, show them this navigation. If this is the logged out navigation, which is what we're seeing right now. All right, so let's find the logo. Where's the logo? So we see here inline style. We want that a little bigger because my logo needs more space. And boom, Danger Life. So with this, then we'd go over to styles and start adding in our brand styling. We change out this blue with our magenta. And there's a couple different places you'll want to do that. You can go to styles and mix-ins and variables, colors. So you want to update brand here. So I'd want to update that with my new colors. And then you also are going to want to update the Bootstrap file. So you can just update this Bootstrap CSS directly. So as you can see, it's listed here. What I do is I just do a search and replace for this blue and any other colors that you want to replace from the default Bootstrap build to reflect your brand colors. So rather than you having to watch me do all of that, I put a little time into doing some brief styling. So this probably took me about 60 minutes, maybe less, to build out. So again, just real quick, home page with the value proposition, the problem space, Danger Life, do what scares you, get started, and just outline what does this app do, add a life goal. Add a life goal that scares you, but you want to do it anyway. Set a deadline and reminder schedule. 2, add friends to your goal that cheer you on and keep you accountable. Pardon me. And celebrate. Once complete, we'll generate a celebration page you can share that will live on the internet forever, showing how awesome you were doing something that scared you. Let me check on time here. All right, so getting past the 30-minute mark, but I want to show you a couple other things. So let's log back in. All right, cool. So I went ahead and added a page. So this was created with Sales Generate page, and that'll generate the page here and tell you which files you need to update. So that generated an add goal less. It generated a front end add goal page. This is where I'm going to have my view app that I can update. And then it added a controller for me, which renders that view as well. A couple other things that I wanted to point out. So as you're adding in, say, your blueprint routes, so now that let's actually show, let's go to API, models. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Here we go. So this is my updated version. So I'm going to go to API, models, goal. And here we can see the beginning of the goal definition. So now that I have this created, I enable blueprints and I immediately have all of my CRUD routes to create goals, which means I'm already 50% of the way there towards my business logic. Once I have those blueprints, I'm going to want to rerun the Cloud SDK so that I have those method calls in the Cloud SDK. But before I do that, I need to make sure that I update routes in the config. Which is, by the way, something I love about Sales is just having this file in the first place. A lot of Node frameworks and frameworks in general, they just kind of define routes willy-nilly all throughout the app, which makes it really difficult to get like a high-level overview of what routes are available. So I love having this just to have a single kind of point of reference for all the routes. So what you'll notice here, API endpoints, note that in this app, these API endpoints may be accessed using the cloud methods from the Parasails library. So Blueprints is not going to add in your routes here. You're going to need to manually define them here to match how the Blueprints pattern and any other routes that you create. And then once you do that, you're going to want to rerun the cloud. So what was that? You know, I always forget I'm going to have to lift it back up. Whenever I forget the commands, I actually just leave the frequently asked questions page usually for last, so that when I inevitably forget, say, how to generate a new page or how to regenerate the Cloud SDK, I have access to it. So sales run scripts rebuild Cloud SDK. So we could do that. Now it's rebuilt. and I can do a search for cloud setup. As you can see here, this is automatically updated, and this is how the methods are defined. So any new routes that I've added to the routes file are going to show up here as method calls, and I can immediately start making those calls from my Vue front end. And then something else worth calling out is the sales generate page. This is registering a new page with Parasails. So this is what I did for the goal. But say we wanted to add friends. We would do sales generate, and I'm just going to call it add friends. I forgot page, sales generate page, add friends. And it's going to give some helpful reminders on the things that you need to make sure to do, like manually adding the route, rerunning Cloud SDK, all of that. So once I do those, I can just switch back, log in, and add a link to an add friends page. So once I do that, really all I need to do here is go into the Vue page and in the server-side template, build out a form, wire that up to Vue, take the results of that form, push it to the cloud method that I've defined in the Cloud SDK, and boom, I'm going to have my first goal already set up and wired up using blueprints. Don't have time to really dig into how blueprints works right now, but the sales documentation is awesome and very well done, and just goes into a lot of good details. So definitely recommend you check out the blueprint section, understand the difference between blueprint actions and blueprint routes, and just kind of get a good overview of how that works. And that concludes the presentation on MVP, building a minimum viable product as soon as possible. I hope it had some good information for you, and just kind of gave you some insight into how I use Sails to get things online as soon as possible. I'll be online and in the chat, so feel free to hit me up if you have any questions or comments, and I'd be happy to chat with you. So thanks for your time, and thanks again everybody for joining us on SalesConf, and Kelvin again for hosting it, and look forward to seeing everyone's talks.